This episode of Uncorking a Story is brought to you by Michael Carlin's latest novel, The Ruin of Souls. Do you like books about gladiators? Well, if you do, that's too bad, because there are no gladiators in this story. However, there are puzzles to solve and plot twists that will leave you speechless. It's the perfect accompaniment to that beach vacation you put off last year, so pick it up wherever books are sold. Enjoy the show. Well, hello, and welcome to Uncorking a Story, where we dig into the stories behind the stories by your favorite authors, or authors you didn't realize were your favorite authors just yet. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I am so excited to share with you the story of Mary Dixie Carter. And if you're around my age, that name may ring a bell, because she's the daughter of Dixie Carter, of Designing Women fame, and the stepdaughter of Hal Holbrook. Her debut novel, The Photographer, is available for sale right now wherever books are sold. And we'll get into her story in a few minutes. But first, I have to talk about road trips. And not just because I just got back from a little bit of a road trip up to Cape Cod with my family, but that's only about 4 or so hours from where I live. I'm talking about, honest to goodness, long road trips. Because our chat opens up with Mary talking about what she's doing right now, which is a cross-country trek with her husband and 2 little girls. They're driving an RV from one end of the country to the other, or one side of the country to the other. And it kind of reminded me of the road trips that we used to take when I was growing up. Not that we would do anything that big. I mean, we didn't rent RVs. I mean, we had an Oldsmobile. And, my father, he's many things. He's many wonderful things. But being a spendthrift is not one of them. And, if you do the math, there were typically 4 of us going down to Florida. Actually, no, 5. 5. My sister would come too. So sometimes I forget about her. My older brother didn't really go on these road trips. He was in college at the time. But my twin brother and I and my sister used to drive from Connecticut, where we lived, down to Pompano Beach in Florida, because that's where our grandparents were. So we'd hop into that Oldsmobile and drive, 15 or 100 or so miles from Connecticut to Pompano. And look, I mean, to my wife, this sounds like an absolute nightmare, because she really can't sit still. I mean, she barely got through the trip to Cape Cod. But for us, there was adventure in it. There was adventure, and I think when you do those road trips, the most memorable part of the vacations are often the drive to or the drive from there. And I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean by memorable, okay? So there was one time we're heading down to Florida, and we run into a freak snowstorm in North Carolina. Now, North Carolina, especially coastal Carolina, which is kind of where I-95 is, not really known for winter weather advisory, really. So we were shocked. But the snow starts coming down. And starts off as a few flakes, as my mother would call it, and it gets more severe, to the point where they close the highway, and we're seeing signs saying I-95 closed at such and such exit. And my dad, to this day, will defend his decision, but we were making good time. And that was the reason why he blew through the roadblock. That was, I guess they left one lane open for trucks or essential travel. And he decided that, getting the family a little bit further down towards the South Carolina border was essential at the time. But I'll tell you this, when he decided to finally pull off the highway, there was no occupancy in any of the Holiday Inns or Howard Johnson's that were right off the highway. They were all booked. They were booked by smart people who got off the road earlier. And needless to say, we had to drive a bit to find a place to stay. And what we found was, well, I guess it could be best characterized as something that made the Bates Motel look like the Four Seasons. This was not a nice establishment. Not that we were looking for, the Ritz-Carlton, but this was certainly no Ritz-Carlton. It was not even a Ritz cracker. So we we get a room, thankful to get a room. And there's a steakhouse next door. And at this steakhouse next door is where I was introduced to one of the current loves of my life, a beef barley soup. Never had it before. But let me tell you, it was love at first bite. And now today, whenever I have beef barley soup, I think of the lessons my father taught on that trip. And those lessons are, primarily that it's okay to break the law if you're making good time. The other lesson I learned was that a hairdryer actually can be used as a space heater when the heater in your motel room doesn't work. Because let me tell you, the heater in the Bates Motel did not work. Another year, this is a bit more of a gross story, but we're about to drive back from Florida, but my mother comes down that morning with a stomach bug. Now, we would typically leave Pompano around 9 or 10 in the morning. Mom declares that she is not well. And by that, I mean coming out of both ends. We don't need to get graphic, but I guess I just did. Now, we're still at my grandparents'. We could have delayed the trip a day, right? There was no need to actually get home. I could have missed a day of school. It would have been fine. Actually, I would have been fine by that. And it turns out that would have been the right decision. But Mom declared that she was feeling better around noon. So Donnie, Big Don, said, you know what? Let's get a move on. We could still probably make it to the middle of Georgia if we leave at noon. Again, all about making good time, people. So we didn't think that whatever was bothering her was communicable, right? We thought maybe she just had some food poisoning. Not the case. Not the case. My sister Mia was the first one to fall. And she fell before we got to the Georgia line, before we got to the Florida-Georgia line. And that was quickly followed by myself and my twin brother, and it was not pretty. Not pretty. Both ends. It was just the car, the Oldsmobile Delta 88 that we drove to and from was forever known as, after that point in time, the Vomit Comet. That's right, the Vomit Comet. But here's the thing. When we think about all those trips that we took as kids down to Florida, what do you think we remember? And we don't remember anything that happened on the beach or at the pool. I couldn't tell you about the knickknacks that we bought at, Bill's 5 and 10 across from the Oceanside Shopping Center. But we do talk about the jogger and what he must have been thinking when he had to kind of hurdle over a soiled pair of tighty whities left on the side of the road after Jimmy had a bit of an accident, and we laugh about these things because they're funny. They're funny now. May not have been funny then. And I don't know why we decided to go over, that whole Chesapeake Bay 17-mile bridge, which was not the most direct route home, but we did. God bless my father. We went over a 17-mile bridge where you cannot really pull over at all. But we did it, and we lived to tell the tale. So all this is to say that I hope Mary Dixie Carter's road trip that she's on right now from east to west is going better than some of those trips we took down to Florida. But I do hope she has some fun memories along the way. Now, that brings me to my conversation with Mary Dixie Carter about her debut novel, The Photographer. And here you go. Here is my conversation with the charming and talented and affable, I'll add that one too, affable Mary Dixie Carter.
I am on the road. My husband and my kids and I are on a road trip, driving cross country, and it's an RV trip. We rented an RV. Never done that before. It's very exciting. But tonight, I'm not in the RV. Tonight, I am. We have like a few hotels mixed in, and partly because I knew I was going to have this interview with you, and I didn't want to be worried about the connection and stuff. So we have a hotel room. I'm sitting in the hotel room, and the kids are off with my husband, and that's what I'm doing.
So I have to, because I've always wanted to do this. So are you going East Coast to West Coast? Like what's the path here?
So we are East Coast to West Coast in a general sense. We have, right now I'm in Massachusetts, and we have a couple of necessary stops along the way. Like, for example, my niece is getting married in Columbus, Ohio. So that's part of our route. We want to get to Niagara Falls if possible. Everything's taking a little longer than we anticipated. It's like we want to make a stop, and then all of a sudden hours have, disappeared. And also driving an RV, which I really didn't appreciate this before we got the RV. Like, you're very limited in where you can go and what you can do. And so you can't just be like, oh, spur of the moment, let's stop over there and let's get a bite to eat. You need to think it through because the RV doesn't fit everywhere. And it needs like a really nice, big, wide path to go. So it's a little limiting, but it's also very fun. It's especially fun, I think, for the children. And the other thing is, because my book just came out, I am stopping at bookstores all along the way. And that's part of our trip, is to have a fun cross-country drive with the kids and also stop at bookstores. So an unlikely story is where we stopped yesterday.
Oh, very cool. Now, what was that in Massachusetts or was that somewhere else?
Massachusetts, yeah, a beautiful bookstore. And then today, I think we're going to try to stop. We're still in Massachusetts. We're going to try to stop at Copper Dog Books.
Very cool. I was just I live in Connecticut, and I was in Chatham, Massachusetts on Cape Cod last week with my family. And
wow.
I always spend a lot of time in a little bookstore there called the Yellow Umbrella, which would take you way out of your way.
But it's a nice bookstore.
But it's a great little bookstore. I actually did a book signing there a couple years ago. And it's just a fun place. Everyone's on vacation. Most everyone's in a good mood. It's a fun spot. It's a fun spot.
I don't know if we'll be able to get there this time, but now that I know about it, you said the Yellow Umbrella?
The Yellow Umbrella. Yeah, it's a small, independently owned bookstore.
I'm going to stop there whenever I have an opportunity to.
Yeah, and then you go right up the street to the Chatham Square and, eat whatever you desire, seafood-wise, or drink whatever you want, if that's a thing.
Oh, great.
Alcohol-wise, it's a great spot. But Columbus, Ohio, too. Like, I got into a lot of trouble in Columbus, Ohio once.
Did you? What happened?
So I interview people for a living, not just authors, but, clients actually hire me to do this kind of stuff. And I was doing a kind of a documentary style video for a particular client, and I was doing the interviewing and my videographer was with me. And he and it was the last night of a project, and he always winds up getting me into trouble somehow because that's just his personality. And we were having dinner in Columbus at like this little pub. And the waitress, she liked us. We were having a fun time. She's like, "Oh, it's my birthday. I'm meeting my friends for drinks. Why don't you come?" So we're like, okay, we have nothing else to do. And we go. And my friend Joe, the videographer, convinces the whole party that we're with now that he's a palm reader. And he proceeds to read their palms. And it's just, the night went into another direction from there. But I'm not going to say anything more on audio about the rest of the night.
Wait, does he know anything about palm reading at all?
I don't think so, but he was so convincing, and he's one of these like really intuitive guys. Like one night, I swear to God, we were in Dallas, and he looks at me and he says, "Mike, this waitress is going to invite us to her wedding this weekend." And I'm like, "Joe, what the hell are you talking about?" And I'm not kidding, hand to God. Waitress comes up to us. She's like, "You seem like nice guys. I'm getting married this weekend. Do you guys want to come?" And
I'm like, kidding.
hand to God, I'm like, Joe, how the hell do you do this? And he just starts laughing. And I don't know.
Did he not? He didn't even know she was getting married?
No, he had no clue, but he's like one of these intuitive guys. He had this like sixth sense about him. It freaks me out when he does this stuff.
Oh my goodness. So, wow, that's like several leaps. He was intuitive about the fact that she was getting married and that she would invite two total strangers to her wedding.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the strangers are only friends you haven't met yet. So
that's a good way of looking at it. That's a very nice, optimistic way of looking at it.
Optimistic indeed. So but let's not talk about me. I felt like we've done that too much. Let's talk about you and. I'm just really curious about your background. I mean, I have a little bit of facts here in front of me, but I'm just curious about like what drew you into writing as a profession. I know this is your first novel, but it's not the first thing obviously you've ever written. So, just if you wouldn't mind, like when did you have the idea that you wanted to do something with writing for a living?
So I started off as a journalist. So before that, actually, I started off as an actor, and I was a stage actor, and I did a lot of classical theater, a tiny bit of film and television, and I really loved that, and still love it, actually. But then I went to work at the New York Observer. The reason I went to work there was actually, at the time, my father was the publisher of the New York Observer. And so I went to work to go into the family business. That was really but before that, I'd always been writing. So in addition to acting, I'd always been writing something or other, whether it was essays or stories or I enjoyed writing, and it was fulfilling for me. So the New York Observer was sold maybe 6 years later, and I had planned to stay there, and then I left after the paper was sold, and I worked at several other publications. I wrote for The Economist. I wrote for the San Francisco Chronicle, Chicago Tribune, and then more recently I did some pieces for Time. And I enjoyed that very much too. Around the time I got pregnant, I wrote a draft of a novel. Not this novel, but this was when I was pregnant with my first child. And I was not able to sell that novel. I did get an agent, and I sent it around, and people said really nice things about it, but no one bought it. So that was not published. It's still sitting there on my computer, and who knows what might happen one day. But I did learn a lot from writing that first novel, and I knew I enjoyed the whole process of writing a novel, and I also felt like I was proud of that novel, though it was not published. So, I set out to write a second novel, and I understood a few things better than I had the first time round, and so here I am today, and I couldn't be more thrilled with the good fortune that I've had with this novel, because I did it before and it didn't work out. I do know how fortunate I am that the novel's been published and that I've got to work with such extraordinary people, and I've such extraordinary publisher, and I'm blessed, and I feel very lucky about the whole thing.
Well, I mean, writing is definitely, it's not for the faint of heart, especially, after you go through the experience of pouring your heart and soul into a first novel and then not being able to sell it. I mean, finding the agent is a huge win, because, most novelists, first-time novelists don't even get that far. So what I'm curious about is where did the sort of, I'm going to use the term that I used to hear in professional wrestling in the 80s, but where did you find the intestinal fortitude to put pen to paper again and start that second one? Because I know a lot of people would be like just so bummed out that they couldn't sell it and move on to maybe something else. What pushed you to pick up the pen, so to speak, and start again?
So good question. Well, I did go do an MFA between the two novels. And I would actually, maybe I shouldn't say between the two novels, because some of the second novel I wrote while I was doing the MFA. So the MFA was really valuable because I did have two kids at that point, and it forced me to prioritize my time and to spend a certain amount of time writing every day, in spite of the fact that I had two young children.
Yeah.
So, and I did that. I wouldn't say I wrote the novel because of the MFA. I was in the MFA because I was writing a novel, and that seemed like it would allow me a lot of structure to really get it done. I knew that I just knew that it was something I could do. I mean, I guess I had the feeling it was something that I could do and something that I enjoyed doing and that I found fulfilling. And I had another story to tell. And I guess that's, what it comes down to, is feeling like I had something to say, a story to tell. And I wanted to get it down on paper and, hoping that other people would respond to it, which is a big leap of faith because, you can write the whole thing and you can love it yourself, but then it's a whole other matter to get other people on board. And so it does require, I guess, confidence. And I don't always feel like I have tons of confidence, but it does require some sort of belief that, well, let me get to the end of this and then I'll be able to do something with it. But it's hard to sustain that. And there were periods of time where I lost it and thought to myself, oh gosh, no one's ever going to like this. No one's ever going to publish it. And then I would try to regroup and get more focused and disciplined and move forward and get it done.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you turn to for sources of inspiration or even strength during those times where you're down? Because, during the writing process, I could speak for myself, but I know I've done this enough with other authors to know that there is a roller coaster of emotion that you go on because you're so excited about the story. And then you talk to people about it. Maybe you get some notes and then you might hit a little bit of a lull. Is there something that you turn to that helps pull you back into this emotion of excitement or to kind of get re-energized about the project again?
I guess the main thing that I try to do, there's two parts. There's two answers to that. One is reading really interesting books can sometimes do that. Or not even books, like a piece in a magazine, or there might be something that you read that hits you in a certain way and you don't necessarily use it as inspiration per se, but it strikes a chord in you and it allows you to access something that you weren't able to access before. The other thing is forcing myself to just write something and accepting that what I write is going to be bad, and it's going to be bad until it gets good. And that's something that it's when I was much younger was really hard to kind of believe that. And I really try to believe it now, which is write the bad version, just keep writing it, and eventually it will get better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the writing everyday thing is real. I mean, and that is, when I talk to authors and even I give advice to other people, it's you have to do it every day. It's like building a muscle. And I think about it like, I'm a runner, and when I first started running, not every run was a good run. I had a lot of bad runs, but every bad run will get you closer to a better run and then eventually a good run. And then,
Right.
so I think there's something to that of doing something consistently and having that discipline to do it, even though or accept the fact that it's not going to be, publishable, but it is like training. It is doing a workout. It is doing it for you.
Yeah. And maybe you can't ever get to the good material. Maybe the mediocre material is somehow like on some layer in the good material, like that is a layering kind of thing, like doing a painting where there's the bottom layer that no one will ever see, and then there's layers and layers on top of it, and that bottom layer that no one will ever see is that draft that you wrote that you wouldn't show anyone because you feel like it had very little merit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so tell me, what was the inspiration of the photographer? How did this idea come to you? I'm always curious as to, where these sparks of ideas come from.
So I hired a photographer myself, and I hired a photographer to take pictures of my two children, who are now 11 and 8. This was quite a few years ago. And the pictures came back, and they were really beautiful. But my children's eyes in the photos were cobalt blue, vivid, bright blue. And they're not in real life. And I said to the photographer, I'd like for my children's eyes to be their real color. And she said, there is no real color. And I was so struck by that, by the idea and by the point of view, by the psychology that goes with that. And that if you were to apply that and keep applying it to someone's point of view, that's what this character and the photographer, Delta Dawn, that's who she is. There is no real color. There is no real anything. I take a picture and I make it what I want it to be or what I think it should be. And then I believe in that version. And then I believe that's the real version. And the reality, or what was there to begin with, is like totally irrelevant and gone. It's not even a reference point because she's created her own story, her own narrative. And she does that in her photos, and she does that in her life. And so that's what got me going on the story.
Yeah, I mean, this character, this Delta Dawn, it's so well crafted. I mean, there's a lot of depth there. It's almost like, I mean, did you know anybody like this in real life? I mean, was there somebody you're basing this on, or maybe a group of personalities maybe that you based her on?
So there are a group of personalities. That's probably the best way to put it. I know a couple of people who lie to themselves, and that's what Delta does. People who lie to themselves and tell themselves a version that is convenient for them to believe. And I think everyone does that. I know I lie to myself sometimes, and sometimes we need to lie to ourselves, but Delta really goes above and beyond in lying to herself when she needs to. And she's extremely sharp and perceptive, but she also she lies to herself. So that's one quality. Another quality that Delta has is this outsider quality, the feeling of being an outsider. And I'd say that's something I identify with. I'm not saying that I'm similar to her because she has quite a number of issues. But
she's like pathological.
But she feels like an outsider, and I think everyone at some point in their life feels like an outsider, whether or not they are an outsider or whether or not to the rest of the world they look like an outsider. People in certain situations feel like an outsider, and Delta really feels like an outsider and takes that with her wherever she goes. She feels like she's one down. She came from the wrong side of the tracks, less educated, less affluent. I mean, this is the way her outsider status sort of materializes. And each person might feel like an outsider for very different reasons in different situations. But in her situation, she grew up at Disney World. Her parents were janitors at Disney World. She was there at Disney World, but not really a participant, just kind of observing it. And that's how she feels in a lot of different situations. And she dated this guy in high school. She describes dating a guy in high school that was from a more well-to-do family. And really the reason she dated him was she wanted to understand the lifestyle and observe the lifestyle so that she could emulate it, so she could fit in. So when she gets to Brooklyn, she's doing really well. She's a successful photographer. She doesn't need to latch on to another family. She could have a nice life of her own, but she doesn't feel that about herself. So she sees this Stroud family as the ultimate everything that she wants to be. They're very glamorous. They're polished. They've got this gorgeous townhouse. They're fancy in her mind, and cool. So she wants to be them, and she wants to be part of them, and will do whatever she needs to do to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus if she just started living her own life, you wouldn't have much of a story. So it's probably a good thing that she latches onto this family. I have to ask though, I mean, because you kind of put her as kind of growing up around Disney World, but did you ever know anybody who worked at Walt Disney World as like a cast member or anything like that?
I did not know anyone who worked as a cast member at Walt Disney, but I did write a piece years ago that I wrote a book review, and I think the book was called One Perfect Day or something like that, Rebecca Mead, and it was about the wedding industry. But there was a lot of focus on Disney, and I did learn quite a bit about Disney writing that review years ago. So I was interested. I mean, it sort of got me interested in Disney as Disney's a fascinating place, and also fascinating people who are attracted to it. And
yes,
I mean, the whole world of Disney or land of Disney, whatever, is just so endlessly interesting.
No, I just find it fascinating because I have I grew up in South Florida in the 70s and 80s, and I remember going there as a kid. It was new back then, and but then I remember like being enamored by it. Like Disney, it's so beautiful, it's wonderful. I took my own kids there when they were little, but like there was like a hidden underbelly to Disney World that I don't want to put a dark cloud over the happiest place on earth, but there is definitely a hidden culture, let's say, among the cast members that I had some friends who did the Disney internship in college, and they came back changed people, and I'll leave it at that.
Really?
They came back as changed people. Yeah.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point I would love to know those stories, because that was the kind of thing that I was researching and looking up when I was thinking about Delta's childhood, because I knew about that underbelly. I don't have that many real firsthand stories, but only what I was able to read about online, etc. But I did know about it, and also I can almost intuit what it is. Like it.
Yeah.
There's a sense that none of this can't be so happy. There's something going on underneath that's not so happy.
Yeah, no, I think that would be an interesting plot for a novel, or like a comedic novel or something. The hidden underbelly of a Walt Disney World type place where things aren't necessarily always what they seem.
Yes, it would really be that would be a great book, just to focus on Disney alone. I mean, I guess maybe you'd have to change the name, I guess.
I mean, I wouldn't want to get sued, They have more money than I do. I really wouldn't want to go down that path, but I mean, I think of this character, the Delta, who's living like this sort of duplicitous life. But then I think of like the times in which we're living in right now, where people live, honest to God, people we know live alternative realities of their lives, or they put alternate realities of their lives on social media. Yeah. I'll see people like with the happy family picture on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm like, I know that they are headed for divorce right now. Yet, to the world, they're putting this, this rosy picture of their lives, on social. And I'm just curious as to, I mean, do you think that that's something that is more prevalent now? Like people just leading, like Delta Dawn, like leading these alternative realities or presenting these false realities of their life now?
Yes. I think that it is so prevalent now, and people living through their photos. I mean, living like almost that they attach a lot of meaning to the photo, and that gives them it feeds them in some weird way. It feeds either their ego or their need for affection, or their need for whatever. The photo does a lot for them, and then also this, what you're describing, is putting this perfect picture up on Instagram, and the perfect picture is just a presentation, and it's not the reality. There's going to be like consequences. I don't even know what the consequences are, but I feel like, whatever, 20, 30, 40 years from now, that we're going to have consequences for this, because it's very odd. There's a disconnect between what we're telling the world is true and what is really true. And, some people take it further than others. Some people just, tweak the photo a little bit, and then some people really, wholesale change of the photo, or just pose in a way to create, so that people will interpret a situation that is not true. Like you're saying, oh, I know that they're headed for divorce. Why are they putting the happy family up on Instagram?
Yeah, and I think, when the bill comes due, it's not necessarily going to be people, let's say in our age group, that are going to be, holding the bag. It's going to be our kids, because they get subjected to, like, I think for the most part, we could tell kind of what's real and what's fake, right? Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but our kids, when all they see when they go on, and they're glued, I have 3 19-year-olds at home.
3 19-year-olds.
Yeah. I'm the proud father of triplets.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
But they are glued to, they're glued to their phones, and they're on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, and they see, their frame of reference, my frame of reference was like 80s sitcoms,
Yeah.
that's kind of what's stuck in my head, and, the Huxtable family
Right.
and others. But, the kids, they follow these Instagram influencers and these YouTubers, and they get subjected to so much, I'll call it alternative realities, that I just hope that they can learn that not everything is as rosy as it's being presented to them.
Yeah, I hope they can learn that too. I couldn't agree more. And I think we should work. I don't know exactly how, but I feel like we should work to correct this, what our kids are receiving and on social media, and try to allow them to see something else that is closer to reality.
Yeah. But then I realize that I sound like an old man right now, because I'm saying that, people, alternative realities, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm, getting upset about it. And then I remember back in like 83, my mother like screaming at us about how bad MTV was. So, maybe it's just the natural course of events. I don't know.
But doesn't MTV seem so innocent compared to...
Well, yeah, especially compared to what it is now. I mean, do we really need a show called Teen Mom 2? It's like, or the next Teen Mom, or Beyond Teen Mom. It's almost like, they're just fascinated. What about teen dads? Like, they get a bad rap. I mean, that would be, to me, that would be interesting. Teen dad. I don't know. It seems like they're never in the picture. Or if they are, they're complete scumbags. Oh dear.
It does seem like, if we go back to like my childhood, it was limited, the kinds of media I can consume. First of all, it was on at a certain time every day, and you either, like, it was a TV show, you either watched it or you missed it. And that was it. That's
right.
And MTV, it wasn't like there was 4 million different things you could access at any moment of the day. It's just too much. That's another thing. Just too many options.
That's right. I mean, back then it was, not to date myself, but, I remember the days before cable TV, and it was 3 channels. Maybe if you're lucky, you could pick up something on UHF with an antenna, and, other than that, it was, and it was limited. Screen time was totally limited. And, now it's, now it's different, and I'm approaching old man territory again, and I want to be conscious of that. But I mean, you had a different, I mean, your mother and stepfather were in the business. I mean, they were in the, and not just on the periphery of the entertainment business. I mean, they were a pretty big part of it.
Yes, my mom, Dixie Carter, she was on a successful television series, Designing Women, for a number of years. She passed away, sadly, about 11 years ago. My stepfather, Hal Holbrook, he had an incredible career, and he just passed away a few months ago, actually earlier this year. And I miss both of them terribly, and I wish they were around. I wish they were around to see this book being published. I think they'd be really excited. So they were both great role models, inspiration. Hal had a one-man show called Mark Twain Tonight that he performed for more than 60 years, touring around the country and around the world. And I saw that show probably almost 40 times.
Wow.
And so like the Mark Twain's words and also Hal's performance, both are almost, like soaked into my system. I could practically recite the whole thing. But that being around that language is so, I think it's helpful if you want to be a writer, having that be part of your formative years, having being in the world of the arts, I think is really helpful if you want to be in that world too. So
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate that I grew up, and I also have an amazing father and a stepmother, and so I wish that my mother was able to read the book, and I wish she were around, and I think she'd be very, very excited.
Yeah, well, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, it's hard when your parents aren't around to, see your kids grow up. I mean, that's the one thing that we always wished. My father-in-law passed away. He knew my wife was pregnant with the kids, but he didn't. He had a sudden heart issue, and he wasn't around to see them. And it's probably one of those things where you of course want your parents to be proud of you and be proud of your success. For us, it was, hey, I really just wished my father-in-law could have known these three grandchildren of his. That's hard.
I know
It's hard.
It really is hard. That's exactly how I feel too. My mom passed away 6 weeks before my daughter was born, my oldest child, and so she knew I was pregnant, and she also knew I was going to have a girl, but she never got to meet either one of my children, and that's just a same as you've experienced. It's just a sadness and a loss because I think sometimes we feel like our parents make things, they're seeing it makes it more real to us. And the way like my 8-year-old will say, look at this, look what I can do, or look what I made, or look at this project, or sometimes parents give that to their children, the feeling that something is real or valid. And so you want to, when you feel like something is this huge part of your life, like your children, for example, I want my mom to see them, to be like, yes, they are here. They are incredible. I'm sure that's how you and your wife feel too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely a theme that I explore in my own writing. This theme of premature loss. And there's so much emotion that comes from that. And I always find that those, certainly you can be inspired by happy emotions, but those sort of more sorrowful emotions can really help fuel the sort of creative process. And there's so much that can come from that. I mean, that's the selfish part of loss, right? Kind of using it somehow to your advantage. But
exactly.
Well, I'm sure that you have a busy day. I don't know where else the RV is going today. Are you so you're sticking around Massachusetts and hitting another bookstore, or?
Well, I'm hoping we will make it to Copper Dog Books, and then maybe we might make it to Vermont.
Okay.
Well, I'll see how far we can get. My husband is doing some of the navigating and planning of our route, and we've had to edit it a bit because we've fallen behind on a couple things. So our original plan may have been a little ambitious, especially because we have to get to Ohio by the 26th for actually the 25th because of the rehearsal. So for my niece's wedding. So we may have to cut back on a couple of our plans. But then after that, we're going to go to Chicago, and then we're going to go further west, and we're going to go to Arches National Park and Colorado, and so there's a lot of exciting plans.
Well, it's almost like whenever I outline a novel, I always kind of know where it's going and I have all the beats, but something inevitably changes along the way.
Yeah.
It's something, because you get inspired as you learn and understand your characters more, but it's the same thing as a road trip, right? The route changes, you have to adjust. And sometimes the most fun is in those adjustments.
Yes, true. Very true. Yes. Sometimes when you're writing something, the being forced to do something a certain way for whatever reason allows a whole new surge of inspiration that wouldn't have appeared otherwise. So sometimes a boundary or some sort of structure that you at first are sorry for, but then you realize it was actually helpful in the end.
Yeah. Well, very good. I think that's a great point to end on.
It's such a pleasure to talk to you. I so enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, it was very good. And Mary Dixie Carter, I wish you all the best with The Photographer.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. My interview, my conversation, not really an interview. I like to think of it as more of a chat, getting to know Mary Dixie Carter and her book, The Photographer. That was a fun one. I hope she's having a good time on her road trip. Hope she makes it to the wedding she's going to in Columbus for her niece. I just really just got so much out of that. I really got so much out of that. The advice that she gives to authors about kind of getting up and really just doing it every day, even though she knows that not everything is going to be great, is some pretty fantastic advice. And I encourage you all to pick up The Photographer. And I'm not just saying that because I just had a great conversation with her. It actually is quite a compelling read. It is available. Of course, you could buy it wherever books are sold, right? So you can go into a Barnes & Noble or you can go to Amazon and get it. But I'm going to ask that you consider, as we're coming out of this pandemic, a lot of small businesses have been hurt. Some of which may never come back or come back the way they were. So please consider going to a small independent bookstore, your mom and pop, if you will, to pick up a copy of Mary Dixie Carter's The Photographer. And of course, if you must buy it online, and I know that not everyone has a bookstore convenient to them, Amazon's an option, but so is bookshop.org. And whenever you buy something from bookshop.org, I should say, donate. I don't know how they do it. They figure it out. They donate part of the proceeds back to a local independent bookshop. So I think that's really, really cool. And I'm going to invite you to do something right now. And that is this. If you liked what you heard here and you want to listen to some other episodes of Uncorking a Story, you can feel free to go to wherever you get your podcasts and do that. Or you can go over to MikeCarlin.com. That's CARLON.com, MikeCarlin.com, because we like to keep it confusing. And check out all the past episodes on the podcast tab. You could also check out my books. There's 8 of them up there for you to consider buying, along with Mary Dixie Carter's The Photographer. And, I'd really appreciate it. And so would all the hardworking men, women, and dogs here at Uncorking a Story. Appreciate it if you would like, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever. Please like, rate, review. And hey, look, if you want to keep in the loop on everything regarding Uncorking a Story, I've got a great idea. You can easily hit the subscribe button. And when you subscribe, you're going to get every episode. And that'll be great. Lastly, I'm going to invite you to tell your friends about Uncorking a Story, because that's a great way to get the word out of all the great content we have at Uncorking a Story. So again, for all the men, women, and dogs here at Uncorking a Story, this is Mike Carlin saying thanks for listening, and until next time.